I fell down a rabbit hole on the internet and I came out with a tarot tag. It's too popular and I'm not like the other girls. This guy is not having the best time. Every single reading I did, I fell a little bit more in love with it. We love a vicious Queen of Swords in this house. Suck it up, read with this deck, figure out how you feel. I adored it on sight. Hello everybody, it's Sylvie. Welcome or welcome back to Tarot Magpie. I hope you are doing all kinds of good today. I am bringing you a new original tarot tag today. This was prompted by my last couple of videos about decks that need to earn their keep, and I followed that up with decks that convinced me right away that on first reading I was like, yes, this is it, this is love, we're meant to be. And then I was thinking like, oh, I could also do a video about my kind of slow burn decks, like decks that took me a little while to warm up to. And then I realized how much we describe, on TarotTube especially, describe having a relationship with our decks. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how sometimes I really do kind of categorize them in a very similar way to like romance tropes. So like love at first sight, slow burn, that kind of thing. I fell down a rabbit hole on the internet and I came out with a tarot tag. This is going to be 10 prompts based on different romance tropes, all with a happy ever after, almost all with a happy ever after. 9 out of 10. I did not restrain myself, so I've got several decks for some of these prompts. If anyone feels like jumping on this tag, I am eternally curious as to the ways that different decks work for different people, and I think this is really interesting because it's one thing to look at someone's collection and see like, oh yeah, we have a lot of the same decks, but I'm kind of curious if, just to see how different people have kind of come to their relationships with decks differently. So if you choose to do this tag, answer these questions however you want: tarot, oracle, individual decks, art styles. You could probably, you could easily answer a prompt with like a whole system, like Rider-Waite-Smith, Thoth, etc. For instance, I know there's plenty of us who swore we would never be able to read pips and then ended up learning Marseille anyway. I am very guilty of that. As this goes live, it will be May something. Marseille for May, hopefully for me in full swing. We'll see how much Marseille study I actually managed to get to, but there we go. So prompts will be down in the description if you want to join in, and I hope you do. And without any further ado, I am going to get straight into it. First prompt is enemies to lovers, a deck, style or system you were convinced wasn't for you until it was. And I know that I used to say, I'm not an animal deck person. I don't know if I ever said that on YouTube. Probably. I definitely used to say that. I remember there was this tag going around about a year ago, last year sometime, of people who swore they were not animal deck people, and then hold on, I have 12 animal decks. I've got the Grimalkin's Curious Cats Tarot, because like for me that was a big fat lie. I am in fact an animal deck person. I have a whole host of animal decks. I prefer animal decks to peoply decks. I've got a whole video about don't look at me tarot decks. Like I don't want people staring at me. I don't want to see a bunch of facial expressions, and so a lot of those are animal decks. I will try and link that video somewhere. But this is the kind of animal deck that is a pretty straightforward interpretation of the Rider-Waite-Smith. So there are still certain kinds of animal deck that I don't like. I tend to not like super anthropomorphic animals. I can't get on with those decks where they've like put animal heads on human bodies. Like that's just not an art style that I gel with. But this, where it's like cats doing cat things in a pretty straightforward interpretation of the Rider-Waite-Smith, like it's easy to read. I don't have to like read into a bunch of facial expressions. It's just cats being cute cats, you know? What's not to like? This Four of Cups. This guy is not having the best time. And this is also just really, really beautiful. So that is one of my many animal decks. And then as another example, I have the Animal Apothecary Oracle, which is an oracle I really, really love. Side note, these two decks are both by Hay House. I feel like Hay House is coming out with some really good decks. They're picking up a lot of like indie decks. I really like some of their oracles. I always used to think of Hay House as like the most love and light publisher out there, and that probably is still true, but there's a lot of really good stuff in their catalogue. Anyway, the Animal Apothecary Oracle is for more of that like animal symbolism, animal medicine kind of take on an animal deck, which was the other kind of thing. I was like, no, that's not me. It's because I didn't have a lot of associations with like particular animal gnosis, is what Tegan calls it. I didn't have a lot of gnosis about animals and what they mean, and symbolism and systems of meaning and things. But this I really like because I feel that you can read it just with the keyword and not think about what are we a armadillo? Let's have a look. 26. Yeah, it's an armadillo. I know things. So you can just read it like as it is, as a cute animal image, and you are about to shine and see what that brings up. Or you can dive into the guidebook and dive into why the specific animal was chosen and what the kind of symbolism and representation is there. So I really like this. And I've really come to enjoy a lot of the different ways that animals are kind of incorporated into decks. So that is the Animal Apothecary. And then finally, since I mentioned it earlier, I'll throw Marseille in here too. This is the game Marseille, which is recently published. I'm talking about it at every opportunity because I am obsessed. So like I say, it's May right now. It's Marseille for May time. Who knows how much studying I will actually get to, but I'm obsessed with this deck right now. So any excuse to show it off. The colors, the queerness, the vibrancy, the little extra symbols and little flourishes in the minors especially, I think are so helpful. My favorite star card ever. So gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And like I say, the Marseille system, I used to say, no way, I can't read pips. I don't want to read pips. I want to read pretty pictures. And turns out I do want to read pips. So enemies to lovers. Prompt number 2 is friends to lovers, a deck you liked well enough and then one reading deepened or changed your relationship with it. And the deck I've got for this is the Fyodor Pavlov Tarot. This deck is an absolutely stunning Rider-Waite-Smith clone, loose clone. This is the mass market version by US Games. I was just using it as a beautiful Rider-Waite-Smith because it's a beautiful Rider-Waite-Smith system deck. It reads really well as a Rider-Waite-Smith system deck, and I was like, this is a good deck, you know. I was like, this is solid. It's nothing that I had a particularly strong relationship with right out of the gate. It didn't lend itself to a particular practice or anything like that when I first started working with it. But then I did a reading that just absolutely hit me over the head. It was partly because it was really brutal. It was like the tower, it was loads of swords, it was all drama. It was a little bit aggressive, honestly, but it was really good. It was a really, really good reading. I got a lot out of it. And I've still not got over that particular reading. But this deck does that a lot where it's just really, really powerful. And shout out for this Queen of Swords. We love a vicious Queen of Swords in this house. This deck is just really powerful, and it's not always like as brutal as it was on that day, but it is always strong. And so I don't reach for this all the time because I know that it usually will be quite stark. And I think that is also reflected, or maybe because of the art style with the black and white and then just like a little bit of color in each card. I also adore this strength card. It's quite a stark reader. It is quite a black and white reader, honestly. It's not too wishy-washy or gentle. It's not that it's not nuanced, it's just not very subtle. So this is my friends to lovers deck. There's our tower with the fallen angel. Yeah, I think it was the tower, the 3 of swords, definitely another swords card. Like it was an unnecessarily dramatic reading, but it was really good. And so yeah, since then this has a bit more of a specific role in my practice. And yeah, I've always loved it for the art style, and now I do just have that like stronger, I don't know about like stronger relationship. I think that's personifying the deck a little bit too much, but it's definitely a more kind of specific working relationship with this deck. So that is the Fyodor Pavlov. Prompt number 3 is Slow Burn, a deck you weren't convinced by, but the more you worked with it, the more you liked it. And like I say, this was the prompt, the category that I was like, I could do a whole video on this, but I picked 2 decks that sprung to mind. And the first is the Crystal Visions, which is out of its box because the box is falling apart and it just flew everywhere, which is ideal. But this is the Crystal Visions Tarot. I have trimmed and edged this version. It comes with white borders. I'm going to show you these side by side since they kind of, well, yeah, they fit the same prompt and it's similar reasoning for both of them. So these two decks I bought because I was curious, and I actually unboxed these both in one video. I bought them at the same time and I unboxed them in a video which I called something like Is My Taste in Tarot Changing? They weren't my usual style. I wasn't sure if I was going to love them. It was a bit of a gamble. Like I say, I was curious. The Wild Unknown, I'd been curious for years. I remember when it first came out and I was like, oh no, I'm not getting this deck. It's too popular and I'm not like the other girls. Side note, the aces in this deck are some of the most gorgeous aces in my collection. This Ace of Wands is absolutely stunning. I was not like other girls. I eventually got over that and then I was like, oh, okay, well maybe I'm curious about the Wild Unknown. Like everybody must love it for a reason, right? And I just didn't get around to it because I wasn't sure. I thought the black and white was a bit stark. I thought the symbolism wasn't there for a lot of the cards. And I was like, I don't know if I would actually read with it very much. And then as for the Crystal Visions, oh, whose fault is this? Summer has a lot of fae and fairy decks, and I was also just feeling very kind of drawn to the fae fairy energy. This is a really beautiful deck, and I was like, you know what? I'm feeling drawn to it. Let's give it a shot. And I got them both in. I was like, I like these. I don't know how much I'll use them, but I like them. And then just over time, I worked with them more and realized that they are both really good decks, and they've both kind of become mainstays of my practice. They're both pretty like indispensable decks. They're the kind that I keep pretty accessible at all times. Very different energies, like in very different ways, but I can read really well with them. I feel like they talk to me and I feel like I get a lot out of them. The Crystal Visions is just such a good all-rounder, even though it's quite thematic, and I usually feel like I want a more neutral kind of deck for an everyday reader. Like when I say an everyday reader, I mean one that I can just grab no matter what the question, no matter what kind of mood I'm in. If I don't know what deck to grab, I grab an everyday reader. And this works really well, frankly, even though it is this kind of fae magical fantasy theme. And I'm like, and it's a little bit gentler than some decks. For instance, the Fyodor Pavlov, like the Death card, the Tower in here, the Ten of Swords, like they look still quite bloody and brutal, but they don't feel bloody and brutal when I'm reading with them. So it's a little bit on the kind of gentler side, but it is otherwise, it's an everyday deck despite its fantasy theme. Have I forgotten what my point is? Yes. My point is, I did not expect that out of this deck. I got it in, I looked through it, I thought, okay, this is really beautiful, and I'm intrigued and I like it. And then truly just the more I worked with it, the more I fell in love with it. And it was the same for the Wild Unknown, but for different reasons. I remember, I think it was the Wand suit when I first was flipping through this, and I realized how the colors changed in the like Ace 2, 3 of Wands. And I was like, oh, this is actually going to be really interesting to read with, because it was the symbolism and the art style and the lack of color that I was not really sure about when I was looking at pictures of this and deciding if I wanted it. But then when I'm reading with this, I think it's so cool to read with it and read, say like I'm reading 3 cards and I've got the Two of Swords, the 4 of Wands and the 2 of Pentacles. And I think it's so interesting to just read the colors as links between the cards. And I really enjoy that. And it's the kind of thing that has only got more interesting the more I've read with it. Picking out patterns that is not really anything to do with the system of tarot. Not to say that the color choices are random, as in Kim Kranz when she was making this deck. I'm not suggesting that her choices were entirely random. I feel like if I'm reading 3 cards, it is a little bit random, like which colors pop up where and the layout of the cards. It's one of those things, it's kind of making meaning out of something that isn't necessarily inherently meaningful. Which, like, let's be real, is that just tarot in a nutshell? I'm definitely rambling at this point. I just found it so interesting the more and more I read with this. As I continued to do readings with this deck and continued to read it visually in that kind of way, I just got more and more into it. Does that make sense? Like, it was like a novelty the first couple of times. I was like, oh, this is clever. Like, the colors line up or the colors make sense with what I've asked or what have you. And then just as I read with it more and more, that got more and more exciting because it kept happening. So it definitely was that kind of a slow burn situation at first. It was like, oh yeah, this is fine, this is interesting. But it was just like every single reading I did, I fell a little bit more in love with it. So, Crystal Visions and the Wild Unknown. Prompt number 4 is Forced Proximity, a deck you used for a month, took on holiday, made yourself work with, etc., that changed your relationship with it. And the deck I pulled is the Herbcrafter's Tarot. I remember saying in a video actually that I was kind of intimidated to use this deck because I don't know herbs, that a lot of the plants I didn't think were native to where I live. And I was like, I don't know plants, I don't know plant meanings, and the images being just scenes. There's not a lot of movement in the scenes, I suppose. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to read that. And I got in my head about it and kind of got not scared to read this deck, but I was feeling kind of weirdly intimidated by it. This 3 of Cups, 3 of Water is so sweet. Yeah, so I was feeling intimidated by it, and then I think I said that in a video, and a couple of the comments were like, just read with it, it's really good. They were said much more nicely. I took that into my own head and was like, okay, suck it up, read with this deck, figure out how you feel. And so I read with this for a month. It was my daily draw deck, Capricorn maybe, because I was like, oh, it's an earth sign, it's a kind of earthy deck, we'll go with it. This 8 of Fire is gorgeous. So I read with it for a month. When I say I read with it, I pulled a card every day and read the guidebook for a month. So the guidebook is actually full of little like post-it tab things, because the guidebook for this is absolutely fantastic. It makes the scenes kind of come to life and embody the card so effectively. And then you have little like crafting with suggestions. So if you wanted to get into the herbalism side of it or the plant magic side of it, there's suggestions for every single card. I just loved it. I completely fell in love with the way the deck is put together. The illustrations are absolutely gorgeous. Once I made myself work with it, it was truly like, yeah, obviously this is gorgeous. The guidebook's really good. Again, it's popular for a reason. People like it for a reason. And it's just got something about it that I'm really glad that I made myself work with it. And specifically that I made myself read the guidebook for a month, because yeah, it changed my perspective on the deck, which is why I do that practice, is to kind of get to know a deck or get to see how I feel about a deck. And it really worked out with this one. So that is the Herbcrafter's Tarot. Prompt number 5, Opposites Attract. This deck is not your usual style, but you love it anyway. And I picked 2 because they're basically the same. This is the Healing Waters Oracle and the Rose Oracle by Rebecca Campbell. So I have already mentioned in this video even that I am not a fan of the more like wishy-washy, love and light, good vibes only, affirmations, think positive, you are the universe, manifest, blah de blah. Like, that's not my vibe. And these decks are the closest. Well, they are that. Let's be real. They are that. They are that kind of everything is wonderful and you are the universe or something. Like here, like new beginnings, a way forward, a new story. Oh, that's cute that they work together. New beginnings, a new story. Yeah, like alignment. It's coming together. Rejuvenate, recovery, time to heal, mysteries, learning and teaching. Like, it is quite everything is beautiful and wonderful kind of a deck. And like I say, that's not my usual vibe, either in tarot or in oracle. But I was feeling away last winter because winter is hard. And I just felt like, you know what, I kind of think I want a little bit of that. I want something that's just super pretty. These are beautiful. I've come around to this art style of this like digital manipulation, collage, photography. It's a lot of women's faces. And I don't love people looking at me, but most of them do have their eyes closed. So maybe that's why it works. And I just wanted something that was going to be nice to me. I wanted something pretty to look at. It was going to like tell me that everything is going to be okay in a way that I can get on with, because there are lots of like affirmation-y decks that I can't. Whereas these, It's, you know, allowing what is inevitability, trust, clarity, a fresh start, a positive outlook. Like, they're positive, but in a way that just feels a little bit more realistic. It's not quite toxic positivity. It's just a lot of positivity. I think that's okay. Sometimes that's what I want. I just want some good vibes, but they are not quite over the line for me to being like I say, like more that kind of toxic positivity sort of thing. So opposites attract. The healing waters oracle and the rose oracle. I've got to say that Rebecca Campbell and artwork by Katie Louise. There's another one coming out in the next few months that's like an earthy one, and I do kind of think that maybe I want that, and I'm like, have I started a collection now? Am I have I started a collection of these decks that I swore I would never get on with, and that I'm like, every other deck of this genre I kind of hate. It's not just like I swore I'd never get on with it, it's that I actively dislike most other decks in this genre. Like with Daniel Noel is the other one, and there is one tarot deck of hers I'm kind of into, but all of her oracles are just too starseedy bullshit for me. But yeah, Rebecca Campbell is coming out with an earthy green one, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. But I'm going to wait for walkthroughs and I'm going to see what the vibes are. It's always a little bit touch and go with the new agey stuff. Anyway, how pretty are they together though? Like the blue and the pink. Like, it's because the art style is the same, so of course they look good together. But I like it, I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, that is my opposites attract decks. All right, next prompt is blind date, an impulse buy you fell for. And that is the Heart and Hands Tarot, which I have recently spoken about in the Love at First card pull. Love at First something. The decks that convinced me right away, this was one of them, and this was an impulse purchase. I was Christmas shopping, and so I was spending a lot of time online shopping, and this deck popped up, and I was like, I've never seen this deck before. I personally haven't seen this on like TarotTube or Instagram. This was completely new to me. It was affordable, and it looked really cool, so I was like, you know what, yeah, fuck it, we'll put that in the basket along with everything else I'm purchasing. It arrived, I did a walkthrough on this, I thought it was really cool. And then I'm not going to repeat myself too much because I've said this in the video that went up, my decks that convinced me right away. I didn't actually touch it to do a proper reading with for months. And then when I finally did, I was like, oh, this is incredible. Like, this is such a good deck. And it's so cool to read. Again, like visually, it's just so cool. Like, I can read my usual Queen of Pentacles, Lovers, Ten of Swords interpretations. And then the details in here are just so cool. And the like way the line work moves, like the flow in the images. It's just really cool. It's just really cool. And it works. And I'm so pleased that I have it in my collection. And like I say, it's an impulse buy that really paid off in my favor, which, you know, impulse buys don't always do, let's be real. That's kind of all there is to it, because I love this Judgment. The little flower head guys. Fantastic. Yeah, like I said, I've spoken about this really recently, so go watch that video if you want more of my thoughts on this, but this is such a cool deck. It was an impulse purchase and it really paid off. Prompt number 7 is Second Chance, a deck you've repurchased or one you've put in purgatory, put away to sell or to pass along, and then got back out and added into the rotation. And for me, that is the Hush Tarot. I think you can track a lot of my journey with this deck over my channel's lifespan. But at one point, this was definitely in the to be sold box of my decks. And I just I didn't want to sell it because I think the art style is so cool. And then it was in January. I was inspired specifically by Know Thyself Tarot, who did a video about pairing the Hush Tarot, or was pairing the Hush Tarot with something else. And I was like, you know what, you're right. it's a really cool deck. So I dug it back out. And I have also played with using it as a hybrid tarot oracle deck. So because the images are so removed from what I'm used to seeing, And I don't love the guidebook in this one. It doesn't help me personally a great deal kind of figure out how I feel about this deck. I'm using it as like a hybrid tarot oracle. So I use it either by itself or with another tarot deck usually, and then read the tarot as tarot, and then read this and just more like intuitively see what comes up with the images, and then use the tarot association as like a background theme or background information for what I'm actually looking at in the cards image. I did a whole video on my like hybrid tarot oracle decks, and so yeah, this has been pulled back out. I think it's, at least for the time being, it's staying in my actual collection. And yeah, I'm glad I gave it a second chance because I really wanted to love it. I just couldn't get on with it as a straightforward tarot deck personally. Although I think it's been a while since I've tried to read it like that. So maybe when autumn rolls around, because it's a very like death and decay autumnal kind of deck, maybe I will try it as a straightforward tarot again at some point. But for the time being, I'm liking using it in like a different way and still getting some use out of this deck. So that is the Hush Tarot. Right, prompt number 8 is the only prompt that I don't have decks for, and this is the only one that like doesn't have a happily ever after, and this is Unrequited Love. You want it to work out so badly, but there's just nothing there. And this was me and the Unfolding Path Tarot, which I have since moved along, so I will hopefully put some images up on the screen. I had this as an indie deck, and then it's also relatively recently gone mass market with Hay House. I would super recommend it if you like people in your decks, because it's absolutely gorgeous. The artwork is stunning. I wanted so badly to love this deck, and there was some cards in there, like the aces in that deck are just some of the most beautiful aces that I've had the pleasure of owning. And I think it was the Queen of Wands in that deck, which really, I was like, I simply must have this deck because the Queen of Wands is so fantastic. Alas, it just never worked out. They were too expressive. That's a lesson that deck specifically taught me, is that I don't like tarot decks that are very peoply and very facial expression-y, because I take it too literally, and that's a me thing. Like I say, if that's something that you like in a deck, I super recommend the Unfolding Path. It's that thing where like I didn't get on with it, so I like want other people to love it, because I'm like, it deserves to be loved, and of course it is because it's gone mass market and it's very popular, but I digress. I wanted it to work and it just didn't work out. And I'm also going to throw the Forest of Enchantment in here because I don't know when else I will have reason to mention this deck. I don't own it, and I really don't think I ever will. It's so cute. It's too cutesy for me, and I think it's, again, like I want it because I think it's dead cute, but I think I just would simply never read with it. And I think it would be off-puttingly cutesy in my collection. But I think I really like it. I just don't want it, but I like want to want it. So I'm throwing that in here too as that kind of like unrequited love prompt. Prompt number 9 is love triangle. And I feel there are 2 ways you can take this. Either 2 decks that are in competition with each other, or a pair of decks that work best together. So it's like the poly edition of a love triangle. So I have answers for both, obviously, and as for my competition decks, these are both tarot collectibles decks. They're both sparkly, so they're going to have a hard time on camera. Here on the left, this is the Groovy Weight Sparkles edition, which is very sparkly, and on the right is the Spring Weight, which came out last summer. These decks, let's be real, they're very similar. If I had already had the Spring Weight, I don't think I'd have got the Groovy Weight, although that 3 of Swords is fantastic. There we go. If I hold it very carefully, then you can actually see what we're looking at. And I do think it's very funny that the 3 of Swords has turned up next to the Lovers, as I am mentioning that I probably wouldn't have this deck if I had had this deck first. So it's like, I'm rejecting this one, and then this is my love. But anyway, God, with the drama and the 10 of Swords, like they are gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but if I had every gorgeous Rider-Waite-Smith clone that I wanted, I would be drowning. So that alone is not enough reason to keep it. And they look very similar. They're both sparkly. Yeah, they're kind of in competition with each other because they do the same thing. They're Rider-Waite-Smith clones. They've got this groovy, colourful theme. They've got the glitz. I kind of prefer the Spring Weight, honestly, because I think the colour palette is more appealing to me. And I like all like the rainbows and butterflies in the Spring Weight. I think it's really fun. It's kind of a shame. And I think I probably will end up rehoming the Groovy Weight. and so I wish I had done a better job of colouring the edges because it's not looking great, but I probably will end up moving this along. The only thing now that I have them out together is the cardstock is so much better on the Groovy Weight. It's very stiff on the Spring Weight. I also prefer the sparkliness of the Spring Weight because it's a little bit too frosty on the Groovy Weight, whereas this is a little bit more easy to see what's actually on the card. So this is my love triangle, 2 decks that are in competition, and frankly I'm leaning team Spring Weight rather than team Groovy Weight here. And then 9B is the love triangle that works best as a pair, and I have pulled out the Tarot del Fuego and the Outgrow Yourself Oracle. I talk about these individually all the time. I really love both of these decks. I use them both on their own. I use them both with other pairings. I don't have a pair of decks that I exclusively use as a pair because that's just a bit too limited. It's not very versatile, and I feel like if I have decks that are that unversatile, they're not really worth the space that they take up. I do absolutely adore this deck pairing, and I think it's my favorite deck pairing. I don't know, strong words, but definitely one of my favorite deck pairings in my collection. I think they just go together so well. The color palettes are incredible, and the kind of energy of both decks just really works. I often refer to the Outgrow Yourself Oracle. Well, it's a tarot and oracle, but I use it as an oracle. I refer to it as like a spiky deck, like it's kind of passive aggressive but also positive, whereas like I was complaining about toxic positivity. This is not toxic positivity. It's that kind of like friend who will tell you what you need to hear even if it's not very nice, because you know, truth hurts, and that's kind of what this deck is. And then the Tarot del Fuego also just it's very energetic. It is kind of chaotic. It's kind of loud. It's like a little bit aggressive. And like here, like at this King of Swords, it's a much bloodier deck, or not bloodier necessarily, but it's got some like arresting imagery. There's a lot more stabbing and skulls. And anyway, they go really well together is my point. Visually, they're beautiful. But like, how far would you go for love with the 10 of Wands? Like, come on. And like, they even mirror each other with the central figure with the red, and then this kind of pink as well. Like, I love that. 10 of Wands, how far would you go for love? And like, how far is too far maybe? And give the world. Like, oh, they work so well. Your voice will guide you, and justice. Incredible. So this is one of my absolute, if not my most favorite pairing. Like, yeah, do you see what I mean about this Ace of Swords? Like, it's a little bit more raw and arresting than most other tarot decks. Tarot del Fuego and the Outgrow Yourself Tarot and Oracle. All right, and finally, prompt number 10, I'm going to finish this out with Soulmates. Love at first sight. It was meant to be a deck that you fell in love with immediately. And it's the Tarot Volatile, people. You know it had to be. So this I adored from the first time I saw it, images online, because the aesthetic, the art style is so my cup of tea. Like the kind of grungy, dark and moody. There's a lot of skulls. There's a lot of like, oh, it's just, I just love it. I have determination in here instead of the Chariot, and it's so good. So I adored it on site, and I nearly didn't get it because it's very expensive and it's an indie deck, so it's not always available. I probably would have ended up getting it regardless, but I nearly didn't get it. It arrived. I immediately loved it. Images, like I say, the images are so good. The cardstock is delicious. It's so easy to shuffle. It's a linen finish. I've mentioned it before, but this 10 of Wands, I feel like gave me a new understanding of the 10 of Wands. And a lot of cards in this deck are like that. Just kind of speak directly to my brain, and they pick up on a detail that I hadn't specifically thought through about that card, and then suddenly I'm like, oh yeah, obviously that's in this card, and that's in the meaning of this card. But yeah, again, we love a vicious Queen of Swords. What more do I have to say? Not much more, honestly, because how much have I gushed about this deck? I think you know that I love it. This death is just fantastic, and like the branches growing, so good. I love a skeleton, I've got to say. Anyway, I'm gonna end that here. This is all my favorite 8 of wands, so that seems appropriate. So that is everything. That is all the prompts for this tag and all of my answers. Like I say, I would love it for anybody to join in. What am I calling this? I think I'm calling this the Tarot Romance Tropes tag, because I think that that's cute. I'm very easily pleased and not very witty, so that's what we're going with. But anyway, do join in, tag me, let me know. I'm nosy. I want to hear about your relationships with your decks, and I just think it's fun for me to be like, oh, this was a love at first sight deck, but it was a opposites attract, or it was like a slow burn kind of situation for somebody else. I just think it's really interesting. That is it. I'm stopping now. I've been talking for a very long time. I'm sure you're sick of it. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking with me. If you've made it this far, I really do hope you've enjoyed. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you do the tag either in a video or like answer in the comments, or I don't know, a blog post, an Instagram, all that good stuff. Thank you again for watching and for spending some time with me. Give me a like if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.